Good afternoon. I'm your host, Jimmy Kim, and you're watching the greatest show on the planet, The Jimmy Kim Show. To the audience out there today, thank you so much for tuning in. We have an awesome episode. I'm interviewing the president of the Katy Christian Chamber, as well as the president of the Katy and Fort Bend Christian Magazines. And we'll be talking about community, spirituality, business, media, and politics. All right, so Joseph, we're going to go ahead and start. Please tell the audience who you are and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jimmy, for having me on today. I am Joseph Menslage. I'm the publisher of Katy Christian Magazine and Fort Bend Christian Magazine. We've been in the magazine industry for about 25 years. I started Katy Christian Magazine back in 2005, so we're in our 17th year. Fort Bend Christian Magazine, we started in 2014, so we're in our 8th year. The Katy Christian Chamber is an offshoot of the Westside Christian Chamber of Commerce, which we started that in 2018, but my partner was very sick. He passed away early 2020, so we restarted the chamber as the Katy Christian Chamber of Commerce with Erica Scardino as my partner. We meet for breakfast always on the third Friday of the month, which happens to be this Friday. Constable Ted Heap is going to be our guest speaker for that. You can go to katychristianchamber.com and go to upcoming events, and you will see the breakfast information there if you'd like to attend and learn a little bit more about us.
Excellent. Yeah, I know Constable Ted Heap.
Oh, yeah, he's a great guy.
Good guy.
He's a good guy.
Awesome. So as you gave us a short synopsis of those activities you're involved in, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper as we move on into the interview. So if you can tell us more about the Katy and Fort Bend Christian Magazines. So they're separate, right, Joseph?
They are. We have two different websites, Katy, K-A-T-Y, ChristianMagazine.com, and Fort Bend Christian Magazine. We basically cover politics mostly in Harris counties and Fort Bend counties. Our philosophy is we report the news through a biblical worldview. There's a lot of media out there, but very few of them do that. A lot of them you really can't get to the truth on certain issues. We kind of report a lot on what's happening that people don't get a story on if they don't find us, especially with the corruption in Harris County politics and Fort Bend County politics the way it is today.
Right, that's interesting. And next, can you tell us more about the Katy Christian specifically? Is it pretty much open to all types of business owners?
It is. We have, you can advertise on there in our business directory or banners, but our website last year we did 1,908,000 page views, which is quite a bit. We went strictly digital because of the pandemic. We lost most of our advertising base within the first 5-6 weeks after the shutdowns. So basically, that's good because last year, or 2019, we reached maybe about 400,000 people throughout the year. Last year, we reached almost 2 million. So about 5 times more people are reading our products this day and age, and we can report on issues in real time. Before, we came out once every 2 months. So, we report on an article. Well, it's kind of dead. It's in an old news cycle. Nobody really cares anymore. But nowadays, we can get an idea on an article, something that's big happening, say the Ukraine crisis. We can have something up within hours.
Oh, yeah, that's important right now.
Really
people
is.
Want news in real time, especially with social media.
Yeah, they do. It's like, yesterday's news, nobody really cares about that because we're living in a 24-hour day news cycle, and things change constantly by the second in some cases. So you always have to be up to speed. And your readers, are very educated readers this day and age as well. I mean, they by the time we get something out, if we're an hour late, well, everybody's heard about it. If we're the first ones out there, we get all the page views. It's competing for the audience. That's basically what we're doing in real time now.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how fast the technology is rapidly changing, too. I mean, I'm a millennial, and sometimes it's hard for me to keep up, Joseph. I think you're doing a phenomenal job of keeping up with that stuff.
Well, when I first got into magazine business, things have changed. You would not believe. We used to have to put everything like on little floppy disks. We would get all the
I barely remember those floppy disks.
And we'd have like 100 floppy disks to get our magazines on, and then and then we'd have to get the colors outputted by a color company and take it in there.
Wow.
And everything was done. Nowadays, everything's instant. Even in the printing industry. So things have changed for the better in that regard. But as far as magazines, true magazines and newspapers, about 3 out of every 4 across the United States went out of business since the pandemic started. Simply, unfortunately, when the economy gets tight, a lot of people, the very first place they cut is their advertising budget. And that's the last thing they bring back once the economy turns around. And a lot of people still do not feel the economy's turned around. Me, for one, I mean, inflation's out of control right now.
Oh, that's definitely something we're going to talk about here a little bit later. But yeah, I'm happy to hear. I wasn't aware that a lot of the publishing business went south recently, but I'm glad to hear that you're still, you're holding strong. Yeah, holding down the fort for the publishing.
God. Thanks to God, that's for sure.
Yeah. Always staying positive.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can tell. That's very important. Yeah. All right. Next, you're also a YouTube host.
Right.
So tell us more about that. Yeah, you do comedy. Is that correct?
We do mostly satire, which is comedy.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we release a new video every Friday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And basically, for a long time, people were saying, you need to get a YouTube channel going. You need to get a YouTube channel. And I started thinking, well, nobody's going to really listen to me. They can listen to everybody else out there. And, people that have been established for years. So I need to come up with a unique approach. So our approach is like, satire. People, if we can address the issues, particular issues, and make people laugh at the same time, I felt like people would have a better chance of watching our stuff. We started last March, so we're coming up on a 1-year anniversary. March 29th is when we released our first video. And if you want to learn more about those, just go to YouTube, type in Katy, Katy Christian Magazine, and then you'll see our channel and just subscribe while you're there, watch a few videos, get a feel for what we're doing. But, so they've done okay. I mean, we're constantly facing censorship there as well. Our top performing videos, about 51,000 right now. But usually most of them do 10, 20, 30,000 views each, so
that's pretty good.
Yeah, considering we're fighting against a lot of censorship, that makes a huge difference.
Right. Yeah, I saw one of your snippets, Joseph, that you sent me the other day. It was really funny. I liked it.
Which one did you see?
It was, I don't know, you sent me 2, but I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw a snippet, like I said, and it was pretty funny. Because I like comedy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Good laugh every now and then. It's really good for your health. I can't be uptight all the time, Joseph. I know you're getting to know me better, but.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, for you, it takes a lot of preparation just to come up with a 3-minute video for once a week. It's a lot of research you have to do. For you to do an hour radio show like you're doing, that takes a lot of effort. People do not realize how hard that is.
It is. That's interesting you mentioned that, Joseph. Yeah, because the audience sees pretty much the end product, but they don't see all the back work that goes in, that's involved in producing and creating a show like this. But yeah, thank you for recognizing that, Joseph. So I really appreciate that.
Of course.
You have a deeper appreciation and understanding because you also work in the industry, the media industry. So we understand each other.
Absolutely.
And the outside people, they can consume and watch. And I'm very grateful and thankful for that.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that sometimes on an article, we've written several articles lately, and you might do 2 weeks of research just to get the information together that you need to put out an article where you can verify all the sources. And it's a 5-minute read by the time it's all said and done. But it takes weeks of research sometimes to get these articles out there.
Oh, absolutely, because you have to make sure, your information is on point.
All the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted.
100% correct, yeah. And we do the same thing here. That's why I like to interview the authorities on what they're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's important because that's who people want to hear from as well.
Absolutely.
Rather than Joe, that's an amateur, doesn't know what he's doing. Nobody would want to listen to that. Versus somebody that's been doing it for a good amount of time. We're professionals.
Now, I think it was JC said, I'm not going to take any advice from anybody that has a smaller bank account for me. And that's actually really good advice. Yeah.
That's not bad at all. Next, so we talked about your YouTube channel. So initially, why did you get into media? Was that always a passion, or?
No, it was actually kind of a mistake. Back in, I used to have a telemarketing company back in the, late 80s, early 90s. And then, I didn't really like what I was doing, so I was looking for a career change. And I kind of narrowed it down to one of 3 things. I was either going to become a realtor, I was going to become a stock or bonds broker, or an insurance agent. And I didn't really like all 3. I used to play softball, and this is back before we had like closed circuit TV, and we played double headers. So sometimes we'd have 2 or 3, hours in between games. And there was nothing to do. There was just like local, TV. So I thought, it'd be a great idea if there was a magazine that was reporting on what was happening in all the different softball fields. And that's where I got the idea. My first magazine was Houston Sports News, and our slogan was professional coverage of amateur sports. Later, as we grew, I actually grew that to be the top sports magazine in Texas, independently owned. And then,
congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As we grew, we became known for professional coverage of local sports because we started covering local sports on a professional level as well as amateur sports as well. So and then somewhere probably about a year and a half after I started that, I just felt God put it in my heart. I was listening to a sermon about, the body of Christ needs to be connected, that, you need to do a Christian magazine. And so I kind of ignored it for a while, but I got out of the publishing industry in 2004, early 2004, for about a year and a half. And then I said, well, what I was doing didn't really work out. So I said, well, what should I do? I should get back in the publishing industry. I was going to get back in the sports publishing industry, but then God kind of reawakened my dream to do a Christian magazine. And so we came out with our first one in November of 2005. We were going to come out in September, but that's when we had like Hurricane Rita hit New Orleans, and later our Rita hit Houston, I think, right? Okay, and then that's kind of delayed us.
Oh, okay. So that's interesting, that transition you did. Are
Absolutely.
you still talking about sports in the magazine, or has it shifted completely?
Only if we're highlighting athletes through a spiritual background.
Okay.
One of the things, I was a Christian back then, but I wasn't always living for Christ. In fact, a lot of times I wasn't. But we would talk about an athlete and, talk about their faith a little bit. We would emphasize that if they were a Christian athlete. But people don't read a sports magazine because they want to hear about Christian views or values. They want to hear about sports.
Right.
So with the Christian magazines, people want to hear about that. So we try to do the news through a biblical worldview, and we don't only cover local politics, but we'll interview pastors, churches, great ministries, just all kinds of things you never hear about that are going on in the community. When I first started this, and you see the world around you, you become kind of jaded. You really feel like everything's lost. But when you're doing what I'm doing, you see people behind the scenes that are making a huge difference, that sacrifice their time, their lives, their monies to make a difference, even if it's just for a few people. And you never hear about these people. You just hear about all the negativity that's going on in the world, all the, wars, rumors of wars, so on and so forth. But with, behind the scenes, there's just so many outstanding people doing so many great things for the community that you never hear about unless you go to us a lot of times.
Yeah, I like that because we're completely on the same page, Joseph, because you're highlighting those local heroes.
Absolutely.
I kind of do the same thing on my show.
Right.
There's a reason you're sitting in that seat. And it's the people, we actually had this discussion on the phone a few days ago. It's the people that are impacting the community in a positive way.
Right.
And most of the time, they don't get spotlight in the media because they're focused on the professional athletes, Hollywood celebrities. I mean, they're good at what they do, but in their local communities, they don't have that much of a tremendous impact.
No.
They may have an impact on their sports team or in the movie that they're in or for entertainment purposes, but actually bettering the lives of local residents, I can't say that there's much going on there. And then that's those people that you're highlighting, as well as me. I do the same thing. Yeah. So I'm so glad that we're on the same page in regards to that. Because as I said, a lot of the mainstream media, as you said as well, there's a lot of negativity. That's why I know we're in media ourselves, but I'm very selective with what I let into my brain, because I feel like the more I watch the mainstream media, a lot of the bad news, it doesn't put me in a good mental state.
It really doesn't. I just watched the first 15 minutes of any news broadcast. It totally depresses you. It's like, what's the point,
Oh, yeah. Versus the Jimmy Kim show and then your content, they can watch us because we're focused on positives.
Right.
Great work that's going on in the community. So that's where the contrast is. Because go ahead, Joseph.
Not always. We do report on a lot of politics locally in Harris County and Fort Bend County and the corruption. It's kind of a culture of corruption in Harris County politics right now. Right. People used to talk about Cook County and Chicago and how corrupt that is, but Houston is fast approaching and taking that over as the most corrupt county in United States politics, and we need to make a change. This is our time to do it. If you're tired of the crime, if you're tired of everything that's happening right now, we need just to make a clean sweep.
Well, I agree, yeah. And in that regard, I like that idea because what you just said is you're identifying problems in the community and then identifying the solutions as well. Because if we never bring those problems to light, then people will never know about it, and then those problems will never be addressed. We're going to talk about the Harris County elections and what happened there, that craziness a little bit later. But next, Joseph, we're going to go on to why did you also decide to get into the chamber business, which I think are great groups?
Thank you. The chamber, there's a lot of great chambers and networking groups that I was a part of, but a lot of them, especially the evening events, really kind of, would go around like cocktails, things like that, bar scenes. And, it's for a lot of Christian business people, some have no issues with that. I have no problem with people having a beer or wine or a glass of wine or whatever, but a lot of people do. And, we just felt like we want to give the Christian business community an opportunity to network among other Christian believers. Mm-hmm. And we've had some excellent speakers. I mean, we had Don Hoffines, I believe, was our last speaker. Our next one is, Constable Ted Heap, had Mattress Mac. We've had a lot of great speakers over the last 2 years. But, we want to give them a different feel where Christians can network among other Christians and talk about, business, but also God, a time for fellowship and, Christian networking among, believers. And you do not have to be a Christian business. We have a lot of people there to attend that are Jewish, Muslim. Our doors are open to everybody, but it's a great opportunity for Christian business leaders to network amongst each other.
I think that's wonderful, Joseph, that it's open to everybody. Because that's actually what I was going to ask you, if it is. And yeah, you're very inclusive of all different types of religions.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just for Christians.
Right. Now, we'll open our doors to anybody who wants to come in. I mean,
right.
Christ, when he was always accused of dining with the sinners and the prostitutes and everybody else, and
right.
he said you need to go, it's not the well that need a physician, it's the sick. So it's like, I'm not saying anybody's sick, I'm just saying like we want to open our doors to anybody because you'll never hear about Christ unless, you open the doors for him. And, as a Christian, that's part of our, calling to let others know about Christ and what he stands for.
Yeah, like I said, I like that because some groups don't do that. They're they're not as open.
Yep, absolutely.
Hey, you're like us or you're not, and this is the club.
Right, yeah.
And if you're not like us, we're not going to let you in.
A lot of chambers are very cliquish. You'll have certain groups of people hang with each other, but, we try not to be that way.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, because even myself, I'm very tolerant.
Right.
I mean, I told you how I am in regards to spirituality, but I tolerate everybody.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, regardless of religion, even political affiliation, race. What else is there? Just what sports team do you like? I don't care.
Yeah,
let's get along as human beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Imagine that, right?
Right. I mean, just because you have a different view doesn't mean that person's evil or they need to be canceled from society.
Right.
So, we try to present both views. Getting back to the magazines, I mean, I am conservative. I do vote conservative. But, we all hold like Harris County politicians, accountable, and a lot of those are Democrats. But we'll do the same on Texas government, where a lot of them are Republicans. So, we just, if they're not going to camp or run, the way they say they are, if they're going to do things that need to be brought to attention, we're going to do that, regardless if they have a D or an R next to their name.
I love that you said that too, because I couldn't agree with you more. I agree with you on that 200%. All elected officials need to be held accountable, regardless of that political party, whether they're Democrat or Republican or even independent. They have to do a good job, and they should be there for the best interest of the constituents.
Well, that's the job of the media, is to hold them accountable. If you do not do that, they become more and more corrupt if nobody calls them out on it.
Right.
That's
true.
what we try to do, is call them out.
Right. Next, Joseph, let's go into the current state of spirituality in the United States. What are your thoughts about kind of what's going on? What I've seen generally is, I feel like my parents' generation, kind of your generation, Joseph, actually, the church attendance rates have been quite stable. But I feel like the millennials and Gen Zers, I've actually looked at some of the numbers, and church attendance rates are steadily on the decline. What are your thoughts about that?
They are, especially since the lockdowns happened. Which
didn't help. Yeah.
It was horrible. Like I'm a member of our church at the Cross over on Derry Ashford. Pastor Johnny Teague, who's running for Congress.
Shout out to Johnny Teague.
Yeah, shout out to Johnny. I love
Johnny.
Our good friend. He's a great guy. But prior to that, they were running about 500 to 1,000 people, through on a Sunday morning, and but now it's probably not even half of that. A lot of people got comfortable staying home watching it on, podcasts. Really, everybody just needs to shut the podcast off. All the churches. I mean, there's a need for that. okay, for if you're old or you're unable to get out or you have health issues. But if you're healthy, you need to be in church. It's kind of like, you make a barbecue pit if you're burning with old coals there. You take one of the coals and you put it off on the side, it's going to go out. The flame's going to go out if you separate it. It's the same way with you by yourself. You may think you're doing great, but if you're not connected to a body, you're gonna kind of fizzle out over time. You need to be connected to a body. Christ said, do not forsake the assembly of the gathering, as some of you are accustomed to doing.
Yeah, in person.
Absolutely. Be there in person. Okay.
Right.
Make those connections, make those friendships. A lot of people are suffering from depression and loneliness. It's always been
and
there,
anxiety.
Anxiety, and it's greater now than it's ever been.
Yep.
So, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. It just doesn't work that way. If you're suffering from any of these things, or right now with everything that's happening in the news, and there's some serious things going down,
Right.
It's a really good time to get connected back to church, back to Christ. Go find a local church. Get involved in the Sunday school groups with the home Bible studies or whatever it is you want to do. That's going to re-motivate you. That's going to re-energize you. And we need that more than ever. I mean,
I agree.
Our solutions are not going to be solved with a Republican or a Democrat solution. It's going to be reserved with a God solution. That's it.
Individually, yeah. One person at a time. And that goes back to just personal health and responsibility.
Of course.
Now, whether they choose to go to church, that's great. But there's other social groups out there. If you like yoga, if you like, hiking or a book club, there's so many social groups out there and that people can get plugged into, and it would tremendously help their mental health. Because as you said, mental health right now, I feel like it's not as visible in society because people usually, it's kind of a taboo thing to talk about. So they're not going to say, hey, I'm depressed, or hey, I have anxiety, hey, I'm not feeling good today. We usually don't hear those things all the time, but I feel like it is a big problem right now, actually around the world, not just in the United States. And those social connections can help tremendously with that, as well as good diet and fitness. But those social connections, it's like the icing on the cake. You got to have that.
Absolutely. And when Jimmy says social connections, guys, he's not talking about following somebody on Facebook, retweeting their stuff.
Yeah.
Person to person, face to face, get involved, become involved with people's lives. And that's if you start focusing on what's going on in the world and maybe praying about or taking interest in things that are greater than you, your problems won't seem so bad.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And another thing you mentioned is the in-person meeting and speaking. That's the special sauce for my show. Usually I bring my guests in the studio, and it just makes for a better interview.
Absolutely.
I know that you already feel that because we have that chemistry in person. Imagine if we did this via Zoom. It just wouldn't be the same.
No,
it would be like night and day difference. And shout out to Joseph's daughter. Hannah's here in the studio, and I know you feel that chemistry as well. Right?
She's my moral support.
Well, me too. Thanks for coming, Hannah. But yeah, it does make the in-person versus the virtual, as we stated earlier. I mean, if the virtual is just out of necessity, like if I'm talking to somebody, so next week I'm actually interviewing somebody from out of town. I understand we have to do that. It's fine. But if they're in town, hey, we're going to bring them in here and have a 200% way better show. Because as I said, that chemistry is just there. Next, Joseph, let's talk about the current state of Katy and just Fort Bend overall, like in regards to the heartbeat of the community, in regards to business and like some of the churches, because I know you're very active in that community right now. Yeah, are things getting better?
Well, I would say probably not. If anything, right now the economy is worse than it's ever been. People are more worried about issues more than ever. The business community, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. I mean, finding employees to work for them, fuel costs, everything's passed on to the consumers. So it's kind of like you're spinning your wheels and it's getting a deeper hole you're digging yourself into. As far as like the religious community, faith-based community, I think more of them are becoming awake, more aware of the issues that are facing them, and a lot of them are becoming involved. There was an issue in Katy ISD where they were having some controversial books in there. A lot of parents formed a coalition to help get those books removed. Still, Katy ISD would not address the issue. It was only after we did an article exposing it, we released it on a Friday afternoon around 2:30. By lunchtime that following Monday, they had those books out of there. Not only that, they created a portal for parents to report on additional books like that. And, there's just things that our kids should not be exposed to, regardless of how old they are. And then, you know, and it doesn't matter, you know, your sexual orientation or anything like that. I mean, they just don't need to hear these kind of things at a certain age if they're graphic. And that's what we
Agreed.
address on there.
Yeah, because they're just too young. Their brains are very, very adolescent and
Absolutely,
young.
absolutely.
So the moral of the story is don't mess with angry Texas parents.
No, don't. You do not want to get the mama bears, you know, engaged. That's what happened in Virginia. That's what's happening all across our United States. Really, a lot of this was brought on by the teacher portals. You know, when we were locked down, a lot of these, you know, parents were kind of seeing what their kids were being taught in school, you know, because their kids were doing it in line now. And then, so basically, you know, they started becoming engaged. They started hearing things like CRT, things like that. You know, it's just, no, kids don't need to be taught this kind of stuff. They really don't.
Yeah, they should be focused on math,
Right.
history, government, civics.
If you believe in creation like I do, you know, we all descended from one person, okay? Two people, Adam and Eve, okay? And the second father of mankind is Noah and his family, okay? So we all descended from them as well. So basically our DNA is virtually the same, so we don't need to be focusing on issues that are going to divide us and cause us to hate each other. We need to be talking about love, you know, things we can build on.
Agreed. Well, pretty much go on into the next topic. It's a good transition here.
Absolutely.
The political correctness and censorship, like, for example, on social media, YouTube. What are your thoughts about that, and have you dealt with that yourself personally?
I'm always dealing with that. I just got out of
goodness,
Facebook jail for 30 days. Before that, I was in Facebook jail for 7 days. The last suspension was the worst. They won't let me participate in groups for 60 days, so I've still got about 27 to go there. You know, conservative media has been attacked relentlessly through Twitter, through Facebook, through Instagram, just about anywhere. So if you have an opposing view against the hive mind mentality and kind of the liberal hive mind, they're going to shut you down. That's what they do. They don't want to argue ideas, okay, because if you don't think just like them, okay, you're a danger to them. So they just want to eliminate you. And the best way they can do that is just not allow your voice to be heard. So, you know, that's what they're really good at. And, but more and more people are starting to see that. Unfortunately, we have people, and I love Senator Ted Cruz. They'll go up there and they'll get Dorsey and Zuckerberg, you know, before them in the committees, and they'll give them a good, you know, they'll chew them out, you know, have a few good sound bites to hang their hats on, but nothing's ever done. Okay. You know, the people that are in Washington don't really care about us. So we need alternative forms of media. We are starting to get around that some. There are other platforms that are being developed, but none of them are really effective. Right now, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook is where it's going to have the largest audience, and you got to go where, you know, the masses are if you're going to educate people. I get, you know, criticized, you know, why don't you do your videos and put them on some of the other, you know, partner or whatever, you know.
Rumble,
that's it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Because nobody goes to Rumble. I mean, there's a few people here and there, but by and large, you know, I'm not trying to reach people that are like-minded with my message. I want to, you know, I want to influence people where
Everybody.
they are. Everybody. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you got to go where the sinners are in a sense, right? So, you know, like if everybody on Rumble thinks just like you, well, you're not really doing anybody any good, you know. So I want to go where people have a different opposing views. I want to try to like, hey, listen, you know, there's an alternative to what you're hearing all the time. This is the alternative. But if you go in with a closed mind, you know, there's no way you can be changed. So if you're approaching any issue, whether you're conservative or liberal or whatever you identify as, if your mind is closed, you're never going to make a change, okay? So basically, you need to have an open mind that, hey, maybe everything I'm listening to might not be 100%, so let me at least hear the other side of the argument. I can make an informed argument or make an informed decision. A friend of mine told me a long time ago, you know, like there's her side of the story, there's your side of the story, okay? And when it comes to relationships, you know, her side's going to be extremely biased on her side. Mm-hmm. Same with you. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. It's the same with just about anything in life. So if you're just getting your news from one source, you're never going to really be informed. You're just hearing what they want you to hear or not allowing you to hear. A lot of times, you know, the media just won't report on certain issues, which is a bigger crime than misreporting on issues that are out there.
Yeah, even me, I look at both sides.
Absolutely.
So I look at liberal media sources, and then I look at the conservative ones, and then evaluate news as I get it in my brain. At the end of the day, that's where it comes from. And also commenting in regards to what you just said, Joseph, the good thing is, we are on all the major social media platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and then all the other ones too. But those are the three, like the key ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now.
Yeah.
All right. So as we know, gas prices and inflation has gone a little wacko right now. It's pretty crazy. So what are your thoughts about that right now?
Well, right now, the Biden administration is trying to blame everything on Putin. And of course, this war has affected that some. But, a lot of them just don't realize we have memories we can think past, when this invasion started. And the prices of gas were seriously going up prior to that, as well as inflation. Everything.
That's true. Yep.
The latest numbers on the inflation numbers really didn't even cover the war. Those were January numbers. The war didn't start until when? February 13th, 14th. So, as blame as though they might, sooner or later, especially if you're the president, if you're a local leader, you need to take some responsibility. If you're shutting down all the foreign, sites where you can get oil, you're shutting down the Keystone Pipeline, Anwar, Alaska, and not giving leases to, different places, of course that's going to affect the oil and gas industry.
Right.
If you're trying to get, oil and gas from your sworn enemies like Iran or whoever, Venezuela, you're just funding them. That's what we were doing. A lot of this war efforts that Putin is doing was funded by us buying oil from them. So yeah, it was great that we shut that down, but we should go to our own sources. We should get our own energy here in Texas. That's going to affect everything. If gas is going up by 20%, you don't think the customer or the companies are just going to absorb that 20%? No, of course not. They're going to pass it on to the customers. It's you, the person that's going in and buying whatever you're buying at the grocery store, that's absorbing all of those extra costs. And it's going to keep going up as long as we have the same policies. And it's only going to get worse, guys. It's not going to get any better. We need to do something different.
Yeah. It just doesn't make sense when you look at it from a common sense perspective. It's like giving the enemy, the tools for your own demise.
Exactly.
Why would anybody want to do that?
People do it all the time, and they do it all the time, and they'll blame everything except for them. It's kind of like, I have a friend of mine, he would get in relationship after relationship, and they would always break up with him at the end of a month. He always thought it was them. Occasionally, it might not be them. It just may be something going on with you. So you basically need to kind of like, hey, if this is not working and things are getting worse, maybe we should explore some of these other alternatives out here. There's no one size fits all when it comes to these policies out there. So basically, oil is going to affect everything in life. It's going to affect our inflation. Heating oil prices, especially in the Midwest and on the East Coast, it's gone up 300%, 400%, 500% in some cases, all across Europe as well. Gas price is 50%. But when they figure inflation, they only put gas in for about 2.2%, I believe. Is what they figure the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And, in New York City, places like that where everybody takes the subway, well, that's not going to, make a big deal to them. But for people in Texas, everybody drives in Texas. Everybody's got a pickup or an SUV.
Truck,
Yeah, like I was filling up, back, say, January of 2021. It took me about $25 to fill up my gas tank. Now it's taking me $55 to fill up my gas tank. And I have to do that twice a week.
That's like a nice meal.
Oh, yeah.
$25?
You figure that's $30 a week extra per fill up. So that's $60. You multiply that times 50. I'm spending an extra $3,000 a year, just me, to gas up.
Yeah.
That takes a big bite. That's a hidden tax. That's a hidden tax. And the people that are affected the most by this are going to be lower income people. They cannot
middle class
afford it.
too.
Middle class, everybody.
Just most people.
The rich, people that really don't care. They never even pay attention to the gas. They probably don't even gas up their own cars. But the ordinary mom and dad out there, college student, people that are really struggling, trying to get by, trying to put food on the table for the kids, they notice things like this.
I want to go back to a topic that I'm happy that you brought up, but you said self-reflection in regards to dating. This is a topic I really like to talk about it. Don't get to talk about it much, but I feel like we need to have these discussions too. But all I can say there is I totally agree with you. Sometimes individuals can look back and look in the mirror and say, hey, they need to produce the best version of themselves to the world, and then those good people will come along. Like good dates.
Right.
I'm trying to do that 24/7.
Yeah.
I think, Joseph, by now.
All right. Of course.
24/7.
Absolutely.
Presenting the best version of myself to the world. And then good things, the people that I need around me come into my life as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm big on the law of attraction, all that kind of philosophy. But maybe you are too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it goes back to, that best version of ourselves.
Right.
sharpening that iron every day.
And the best version of yourself that's authentic. I mean,
Yes.
you can reflect an image of yourself that isn't true, and people are going to see through that eventually if they spend enough time with you. You just want your yeses to be yeses, your nos to be nos. Just be sincere in what you're trying to do and say, stand for the truth, stand for what you believe in. If they don't like it, well, they don't like it.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, but you're going to attract people that are just like you. When you and I do what we're doing, Jimmy, we're encouraging 10 others to take a stand for what we believe, what they believe in
true.
as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how you start a movement, okay? Yeah. If you're taking a stand for the truth, well, that encourages, your neighbor or somebody who's reading one of your articles to talk about issues as well. They can't cancel everybody, okay? They just can't. The only one I worry about truly being canceled by is God, because when he cancels you, you're canceled, okay? And if you're, as long as God's behind you, I'm not really going to worry too much about what other people say or do about me.
Yeah, I agree with you on that topic as well. Embracing, like I said, presenting the best version of yourself, but the true version too. Because if you're being fake, people can sniff that out really fast. I can. So I'm a big advocate for that too. Yeah, be yourself, but if you have to change for the betterment of yourself, then we have to do that.
Absolutely.
But if it's like too far down the road, then maybe it's a fake version.
Right.
Next, Joseph, let's talk about, what are your thoughts about the Russia-Ukraine war right now?
Well, it's terrible. I believe, Russia sensed weakness. They moved. Iran just, attacked one of our bases in Iraq last week.
I saw that.
Yeah. It's like, you have to, like Reagan always said, strength but verify strength through, peace through strength. If you're going to be the strong guy on the block, you need to be able to back that up, okay? So people are always going to be drawing a line in the sand, see exactly what they can get away with. My kids always did that. Okay?
Yeah, they'll keep poking you.
Exactly. You draw the line, you don't do anything. They draw the line a little bit closer, and that's where we are right now. If you don't have any strong convictions, if, you're going to let people walk all over you, they're going to walk all over you. Yeah. So, your yeses need to be strong yeses, okay? And if they cross that line, you need to back it up with some action. And we're not doing that right now. So I think Putin sensed weakness. He moved in. It's horrible. It's unbelievable how the Ukrainian people have been resisting. Zelensky is, kind of like a modern day Churchill in a sense. But at the end of the day, these guys are in it by themselves. They're getting some support. They're getting volunteers. Even soldiers from the United States are going over there volunteering their time. But we're not, giving them the tools they need to win the war. Like, there's no reason we shouldn't give them those MiGs. Basically, now, I understand you're going to, you don't want to provoke World War III, but if you're always allowing somebody to just say, hey, I got nukes, okay, and then you just back down on everything that comes along, they're just going to keep on taking and taking and taking. You got to take a hard stand. And I think that's where our world is right now. It's good to see NATO kind of unified the way it is, but, they kind of brought it on themselves by being weak for so many years, They never would have done this under our last administration. Let's just put it that way.
True. Yeah. And events like this have been happening since the dawn of time.
It has been, yeah.
To me, it doesn't surprise me. I pay attention. It's crazy what's happening, but it is what it is.
It is.
There have been wars in the past that have been a lot bigger than that in scale.
Well, freedom is a relatively new concept. It's only been tried for about the last 250 years, the way it has been on a scale, this magnitude. But prior to that, the world has always been ruled by tyrants and dictators, and most of them were not benevolent. They ruled by an iron fist. You cross that line, you'd get put to death, or you'd be in prison. They take away your property, they take away your lands, they'd sell your children into slavery, whatever, okay? That's just the way it was until recently. And people are willing to just give that away without even,
without
taking
fighting,
without fighting for it. And people, usually like missionaries, people that have spent a lot of time, abroad, say they've been missionaries in India or wherever for a year or 2 years, they come back to the United States, they don't realize how good they've had it in this country. And we're just willing to give it all away. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I see that all the time. That's why I always promote a civic engagement.
Yeah,
and that's why we have these conversations on the show. So we can, once again, identify the problems and discuss the solutions for those problems. And
we have to have, both sides of the arguments presented. And I appreciate you allowing me to do that today, Jimmy. I really do.
Oh, surely. Yeah. It's our duty actually as men on this planet to to solve problems that
Absolutely.
are happening in the community.
Absolutely.
That's part of the job of being a man.
And you can only solve issues if everything is explored. Unfortunately, we only allow one side of the argument to be told anymore. And we come up with solutions that, that have no chance of working, and we keep getting further and further into where we are.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that too. Me personally, I'm open to hearing both sides of the story as I check my news from both sides, and I stay very open-minded myself. I mean, if something comes along that's better than things that I'm thinking about in regards to like policy, I will embrace and adopt that new idea. But it has to be sound.
It has to
Yeah,
be.
because I'm pretty firm on my stances with a lot of my ideals. Next, let's talk about in Harris County. We had a debacle with the Harris County elections administrator. Her last name's Longoria, I believe.
Isabel Longoria.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So what are your thoughts about what happened with that? I mean, it's crazy.
No, she was really just kind of appointed without being elected. Usually these positions are elected by the people, and which is really the Harris County District Clerk's job, but he didn't really want to do it, and so he just kind of appointed somebody that's not accountable. And so she can pretty much do whatever she wants. We were on to her back in the fall. We reported our first article on her where she illegally mailed out absentee ballots to people, even though it breaks virtually every state law doing that. And did it anyhow. Doesn't really care. It's just we're going to do what we're going to do, and who's going to stop us? Because that's the problem. We don't have a government that's willing to enforce the laws out there. So if they want to do it, they just do it, and that's what she did, and kind of skewed a lot of election results for the school board in HISD. But that's okay. We still took a few seats. So basically, if you have people that are unaccountable or unqualified for their job, they're going to make a debacle of it, and that's what happened. We had like 10,000 votes that weren't even counted. Discovered like 2 days after the election was over.
That's ridiculous.
It's totally ridiculous, and they weren't even going to say anything. But thankfully, some of the laws that were passed in SB 1, Senate Bill 1, which dealt with some of these issues, helped discover the votes that were not counted. And even the Houston Chronicle, as much as they usually carry the water for these guys, came out and said, hey, Democrats, it's not the Republicans' fault, because they were trying to blame the Republicans for this, and, it's your fault, okay? Own up to it, make it right. Isabel Longoria is stepping down, but of course not until July 1st after the runoffs are done. Is a good first step, but it's so much deeper than that. We need to kind of see what's happening with Lena Hidalgo's office, Rodney Ellis, so on and so forth. Of course, the Texas Rangers, raided her on, I believe, Friday, right?
Recently.
Yeah,
Very
recently. And so there's a lot of things that are going to come out over the weeks and months to come about what's really been happening in Harris County politics. That's going to shock a lot of people.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit before, but in the private sector, if you don't perform, you get fired the same day. So why should it be any different as a public administrator? Because obviously she didn't perform. Over 10,000 votes were not accounted for. If that was mine, I'd be so angry. I don't do mail-in, but 10,000 people, over 10,000 votes actually.
Absolutely.
The votes weren't counted. And then she passed the deadline as well for that to be, I guess, official. That count to be official.
Right.
That deadline was not met.
No,
Yeah.
It was like, we were like the last county reporting. I mean, I was trying to figure out the results 2 days later.
Oh, yeah,
I
same
still
here.
couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
But the thing is, as you were mentioning, like in the private sector, if you mess up like that, you're fired.
You're done.
Okay. And in the government sector, unfortunately, these people are given a raise. They're promoted, appointed to a bigger position, a position they're not qualified to do. I mean, you can throw a dart at a phone book. You remember how we used to use those to look up numbers back in the day? And then and it can land on anybody's name there, and they would do a better job than a lot of the current government officials are doing in Harris County and in our United States government right now. These people are clueless to what they're doing, yet they keep promoting them, keep advancing them to their next office, and they're in over their heads, okay? We need real solutions, and we're not going to get them through bureaucrats.
Yeah, and the way that the audience can make an impact there is by voting.
Absolutely.
Right, Joseph?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Get out and make your voices heard. Don't
Yeah.
say, well, it doesn't really matter, because, I'm not sure if my vote's going to really count anyhow. Well, it does. People felt that way in Virginia. They like Virginia was a blue state. I mean, it went like plus 11 Democrats in the last election. Republicans won everything by plus 2, 3. So it was about a 14, 15 point turnaround because people got engaged. They got out and voted. It was all over the school board billboard stuff, which is kind of spreading over the United States right now. But if you want your voices to be heard, do it. Okay, you have an obligation to vote, but a right to vote that so many people don't get to do across the world. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and eventually it won't matter. So you need to be engaged. Okay. Because if you don't, we're going to lose all of our freedoms. We've already lost so many of them over the last 10 years. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so you're hearing it from both of us. We encourage civic engagement. Minimally speaking, if you can vote, please do that. But there's other activities that people can get involved in, meeting candidates, maybe working on a campaign, finding about policies, going to the meetings with the county, state.
Get out block walking. If you're like a candidate, go knock on doors for them, pass out literature. That's how democracy, that's how you do it, is in the trenches. You win these battles in the trenches, one heart at a time,
right.
One door at a time. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years with Pastor Johnny Teague. I get out and block walk with him almost every Saturday. He does it like 6 days a week. I do it 1 day a week. And sometimes, like we get closer to the election, I'll start hitting houses on my own too. But that's how you engage people.
Mm-hmm.
That's how, democracies are changed. Well, it's how our system works. So if you don't get engaged, we're going to lose it. I think last time we had like 19 million registered people in Texas to vote. For the last election, we didn't even have 3 million people actually voted for the primaries.
Oh, really?
It
went down?
It was about 2.9 million. So if you do the math, that's about 1 out of every 6. So that's about an 18%, turnout. That's pathetic,
really
guys. That's pathetic.
Yeah.
Okay, where were you? Okay, I mean, you can't take 1 hour to vote. I mean, people always say, well, I just don't have time to get out and vote. But they'll watch 6 hours of, their favorite
Netflix.
show. Netflix, kept binging.
Or TikTok.
Or TikTok, or whatever is important to them. People always make time for what they consider important in their lives, okay? If you don't consider freedom important, well, I don't know what to say, but it is one of the most important things we have.
Right. No, for me, yeah, actually, it took me 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So not even an hour.
Right, right. It took me about 15 minutes as well. So,
yeah. And people are scrolling on Instagram for like 2 hours. You know what I mean? Come on, folks.
Right.
We got to get on top of it. All right. So as we look at everything, let's go back on what is your best moment of your career thus far? I mean, I know you're still pretty young, so there's a lot ahead of you, Joseph. But
well, from my best moment, okay, I love what I do, but when somebody tells me, hey, Katy Christian Magazine has made a huge impact in my life, because I found God through Katy Christian Magazine. That means so much more to me than
right.
an article, from any awards that I receive, anything. Okay, when somebody says, hey, look, you affected me spiritually, that's because of some articles that you've written, that I've found God. That means more to me than anything that we've ever written, okay? Because those things are eternal, okay? It's kind of like when I had my sports magazine. I loved what I did, okay? I love sports. I'm still a sports fanatic. But at the end of the day, nobody cares what the Astros did last year or this year, because it's a new season, okay? But our slogan with, Katy Christian Magazine, Fort Bend Christian Magazine, is family-friendly news with an eternal purpose. When we're impacting people eternally, that's what makes a difference to me, okay? Because, we're changing somebody's lives, and I totally believe that, Christ is the way, okay? But if you're impacting people's lives for the better, how can that be a bad thing? Okay, so
yes.
That means so much more to me. But we've had a lot of great moments. Some
right.
of our articles have really impacted, like the one I mentioned about Katy ISD, how we were able to get, some controversial books out of the libraries through an article that we had done,
mm-hmm.
In a single weekend that the parents had been, butting their heads against the school board for months and months prior to that with no results. Things like that make a big difference. But, impacting somebody in their spirituality, I think, is the most important thing for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What is in the future for Joseph Menslage? Did I say your last name right?
Menslage.
Menslage.
That's how everybody pronounces it. I'm used to it. The future is we want to continue to grow. Like last year, we had 1,908,000 plus change on page views. I want to do 2.5 million this year. I'd like to reach 1 million people a month, and I think we can get there. We're growing, but again, we're facing constant censorship, which is hard to get our message out there, but to make an impact. And the way we do that is through, advertising and through donations. So anytime anytime you go to an article at katychristianmagazine.com, there's always going to be a donate button at the end of the article. So if you want to donate, just press that. $5 or $10 a month goes a long ways in helping us meet our needs. And we want to grow. We want to continue to get the truth out there. Okay, we just want to continue to have an alternative view when it comes to world news. We shouldn't only have one view, guys. Okay, you may not agree with us, but a speech that you disagree with is not hate speech. It's a different view. Okay, so you need to explore that and see what else is out there. Just do not take everything for granted that, you know, the local news or the national news channels are telling you. You know, do some research for yourself. Be informed. Don't get your news from Apple. Don't get your news from Yahoo, because they're pretty biased in what they want you to see or hear.
Yeah, everybody needs to question everything. That's what I
You
always
really
say.
do. You really do. I mean, even if you go to church,
Even Fox.
If you go to church, okay,
Yeah,
you know,
question everybody.
You don't go. If your pastor is saying something that you like, you know, you need to make sure he's telling you the truth too. So if he's saying this and you're not sure about that, look it up in the Bible. Okay, it's not that hard to do. Just do a Google search. Okay, you know, whatever he's talking about, see if it's in the Bible. A lot of people say, "Oh, God helps those that help themselves." Okay, well, that's not in the Bible. Okay, so you know, people always say things are in the Bible that aren't really there. So I always tell people, okay, you know, like, you don't believe in God, okay? But you sit here, you've never read the Bible, you've never explored it. A friend of you told you this is in the Bible, but it's not there. You're banking everything that you have on whether or not that's true, okay? For me, like as a Christian, I've lived a great life, okay? I've had a lot of fun times in this life. And if I'm right in what I believe in, okay, I lose nothing at the end of the day because I'm dead if there is no God. But if I'm right in what I believe in, you know, and you're wrong, you've lost everything. You've lost eternity. So just make sure before you accept something as fact, look it up yourselves. Take 5 minutes to do some little research, you know. Explore for yourselves to see if what they're saying is true or false. Just do not take anybody's word for it, not even your pastor.
Love that. Whenever you had adversity in your career, Joseph, what is the way that you dealt with that and kept moving forward?
I've had a lot of adversity in my career. The toughest thing I've ever had to deal with was, you know, when my children's mother died back in 2008. And I had just started the magazines about 3 years prior. And, you know, she was basically a stay-at-home mom. And then, and I basically had to do both roles at the same time. I remember early on, I was laying in bed, you know, crying, seeking answers from God. And I'd say, I do not know, God, how I'm going to make it through these next couple of years or, you know, make it through tomorrow, really, because it was so hard when it was two of us, you know, doing all this. You know, because at the time my children were 7, 8, 10, and 12. And now I have to do everything. But there's just so many. And plus, in 2008, we were having a huge stock market crash. I mean, the economy, nobody was buying cars. I lost so much of my advertising back then. And I used to look at what I was paying myself in those days. I ran into one of my old checkbooks, and I was like, how did we ever survive, God, during this time? But God got us through it. And now my children are 22, 20, 21, 22, 24, and 26. They're all grown. And even though I felt like I made so many mistakes, they always tell me I was such a great dad to them, and I sacrificed so much. To me, I would go back to those days any days. I mean, now my kids are grown, and I miss them so much, you know. And then that's the best years of your life. I know a lot of people are stressed about their children and stressed about the world, but never be anxious to get away with the days that are so important in your life, and that's your children. You know, that's your relationship with your spouse or whoever, okay? You know, cherish those days because those days come and go in the blink of an eye.
All right, and to wrap up the show, Joseph, 3 tips for success in business.
Have a plan, okay? Most people go through life and they get to the end of their lives and they never accomplished anything that they wanted. That's simply because they never wrote it down, not even one time. So have a plan, okay? Be driven, okay? Most people never even start a business, even though most people have a great idea that they probably could have succeeded in their lives, but they're just afraid to try, okay?
Right.
Fear of failure is huge.
Oh,
so,
yeah, it is.
you know, but you don't fail. You only fail if you quit trying, okay? And secondly, you know, or lastly, I should say, get out there and meet people. Don't take advice from people that haven't accomplished anything. When I first started my first magazine, Houston Sports News, back in 1995, a lot of people would say, "Oh, you can't do that. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody's ever competed against your competitors successfully." So I quit taking their advice, because if I would have done that, I never would have tried. And if you don't try, you're never going to succeed. Okay, and you might not succeed, but at least you tried. Okay.
Yeah, people that talk down like that, they actually motivate me.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. You think I can't do that? Okay, yeah, I'll prove it wrong. I'll work 10 times harder.
Absolutely. Work hard, of course, but if you're going out and your goal is to try to show people, see, I told you so, usually they're not going to be the most successful. Politicians that put their lives in politics aren't the best politicians. It's people like President Donald J. Trump, that did it because he saw our country was, in need of change. He became a good president because he wasn't doing it for his own glory. He was doing it because he was trying to help our nation, heal and grow.
Yes, agreed. That makes the best politicians.
Absolutely.
That work out of because they care about the country and the constituents rather than self-interest.
Exactly. And if you're getting into politics or whatever you're getting into, over greed, over your self-interest, people that make the best teachers are people that love kids. People that, have the best jail ministries are people that spent time in prison. People that have the best alcohol and addiction recoveries are people that were addicts themselves. So, a lot of times, these things, Satan kind of gives it to us and, will allow it to destroy our lives. It can. But, you can turn around and use anything that's bad that's happened in your life as a positive. It can help somebody where they're at. And so just, utilize what God's given you, regardless of what that is.
All right, and we're going to wrap up the show for today. Joseph Menslage, I said that correctly?
Menslage. You're getting close.
Okay.
You're getting
and
close.
Hannah as well, his daughter. Thank y'all so much for coming to the studio. Jimmy Kim here. Have a fantastic day. And to the audience, once again, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next week, Monday at 12. Bye.
Bye.